Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome back to the channel. This is Smart TCG, and today I'm going to be going over my top 10 decks currently in the standard format. Over the past couple of weeks, the metagame has shaken up quite a bit, so I think it's important to make a video going over some of those changes and also how the metagame is shaping up heading into upcoming tournaments. With that being said, all my deck lists will be in the description, so make sure to go check that out if you're just looking for the lists. But with that being said, thanks for all the support as always. If you enjoy the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Let's hop into number 10. Alrighty, hopping into number 10 here, we have Miraidon. Now, this is a deck that has actually been seeing a relatively decent amount of success over the past couple of weeks. We most recently saw it get top 8 at the Portland Regional Championships, this Fluffy version, and we saw the Regieleki VMAX version get top 8 at the European International Championships. And I think this deck is pretty good. Your goal is to use Tandem Unit to be able to get tons of lightning type attackers onto the field. You have an energy acceleration engine in Fluffy with that Dynamo allowing you to power up your Pokemon like Magnezone, Raichu, and Raikou V. You do also attack with Miraidon, but this deck is mainly going to be focusing around using Raikou, Raichu, and Magnezone. Magnezone's Electro Star allows you to deal 90 damage to 2 of your opponent's bench Pokemon, so this is really good versus those Lost Box variants if you're able to use the Magnezone V's first attack to be able to drag up the Manaphy and take it out, and then you can use that Electro Star to wipe multiple Comfeys off the field. Raichu with that Dynamic Spark, not Electric Spark, Dynamic Spark is really good to be able to one-shot those big VSTAR and VMAX Pokemon. You have Sky Seal Stone as well, which is going to allow you to kind of regain that prize trade, allowing you to take 3 or 4 prizes in one singular turn, which is absolutely incredible. You have Raikou with that Fleet-Footed, which allows you to have a little bit more of a consistent early game, as you don't have cards like Radiant Greninja or Lumineon to be able to search out supporters early. Having that fleet-footed early game is really nice, on top of a great attack, Lightning Rondo, being able to rush down your opponents really quickly with turn 1 KOs. Zapdos is also really nice in this deck because it increases all your basic lightning type attackers by 10, which is really good because it makes Miraidon's Photon Blaster deal 230 damage, which is enough to knock out things like Dragonite V and also Tyranitar. So that's the reasoning behind why the Zapdos I think really needs to be included in this deck. Some people have been using that spot for maybe a third Mareep or something like a Radiant Greninja. I think the Zapdos, just specifically because of Tyranitar at the moment and also the Dragonite, it's just really important, I think, to have that card as of right now. 4 Serena, 3 Judge, 2 Professor's Research, 2 Arven. Arven is a great card in this deck because you're able to search out cards like Electric Generator on top of also tool cards. Tool cards are not considered items anymore, so you get to get something like an Electric Generator plus either one of the Seal Stones or EXP Share to be able to continue to set up your board state. 2 Boss's Orders seems relatively okay because we already have 4 Serena. This deck really focuses on using Gust after Gust effect turn after turn, which is why we have so many in the deck, because it's kind of hard to also find them as well, because once again we don't really have a really strong draw engine, which is why we play so many Gust effects. Rest of the list here, pretty simple: 4 Ultra Ball, 4 Electric Generator, 2 Escape Rope, 2 Nest Ball, a Switch card, and EXP Share, both the Seal Stones, 3 Beach Court, and 13 Energy. Miraidon still really strong. I think it deserves its spot in the top 10, and if the metagame maybe starts to shift a little bit more away from Lost Box, we could see this move up in the rankings. But as of right now, solid deck. Has some sketchy matchups, especially versus those one prize decks and also path decks. However, still pretty strong. All right, let's hop into number 9. Hopping to number 9 here, falling all the way down to number 9, we have Gardevoir EX. Now, this is a deck that at the beginning of the format was rated incredibly highly. I think I even had it in my top 3 or 5 decks for quite some time, but as the metagame has evolved and as Lost Box has become just such a powerful deck in the format, Gardevoir has fallen down quite a bit. On top of its also consistency issues and being a little bit slow, I think that's another reason as to why this deck has kind of fallen out of favor. However, it's still really strong when you get it set up. Your goal is to use the Gardevoir EX's Psychic Embrace to power up your Pokemon like Gardevoir Shining Arcana and also Zacian V. We've included the Forest Seal Stone on top of the Sky Seal Stone in this deck. Forest is really good at making sure that you can get that turn 2 rare candy Cresselia versus decks like Lost Zone Toolbox, and it's also really good in Mirror Match. As the metagame has kind of started to evolve, Sky Seal Stone is not as useful versus as many decks as something like the Forest Seal Stone is, which is why I've included the Forest Seal Stone. However, Sky Seal Stone still very good versus decks like Mew VMAX and Arceus variants. as well. Rest of the list here is pretty standard. The one thing I think that is worth noting is I do play a one of Arven as of right now. Arven is really good to be able to search out something like that Seal Stone and also the rare candy to pretty much guarantee those turn 2 attacks, which I think is really good. You can use that Lumineon's Luminous Sign to be able to pretty much search out the entire combo. This deck is incredibly powerful when it gets set up and arguably has the best engine in the game with Refinement and Shining Arcana. However, the only thing holding it back is the consistency and how difficult it can sometimes be to get to those situations where you're able to kind of burn through your entire deck and kind of control the tempo of the game. However, really strong deck though, and I do think that this deck has a lot of potential to move on up as the weeks go by, and also has some really cool new cards that it'll be gaining from the brand new set Paldea Evolved that I'm excited to go into in the future. All right, let's hop into number 8. Hopping to number 8 here, we have Arceus GIRATINA, the deck that won Portland Regionals a few weeks ago, piloted by Landon Caitlor, and it still is a very strong deck in the standard format. Incredibly simple vanilla deck. Basically, your goal is to use that Trinity Nova to power up GIRATINA VSTAR's Lost Impact. You have a great consistency engine in Babero and Scovit, and you also have arguably the best disruption tactic in the game, being Judge and Path to the Peak. Some interesting cards in this deck to kind of go over. You have 2 Trekking Shoes just to help kind of boost that consistency that you need. You have Cleansing Gloves as well, which allows you to hit 310 on things like Gardevoir EX, being able to one-shot them, and then also one Choice Belt versus those non-EX variants. Rest of the list here, relatively standard. It's arguably the most simple deck in the standard format and easy to learn. So if you're looking for a deck that's easy to learn and also very strong, I think this is the perfect choice for you. However, as the metagame has kind of started to evolve, people have kind of become more adept to handling these Judge Path variants, which is a reason as to why I think this deck has fallen a little bit down. And on top of it, it can be a little bit clunky at times, especially versus matchups where you can't find the barrel. Sometimes your deck just kind of stalls out. But with that being said, it's still a very respectable deck and has decent matchups across the board. It's just not overwhelming in any way. All right, let's hop into number 7. Hopping to number 7 here, we have Goodra VSTAR. Goodra has been around for quite some time and it consistently performs well, and I think that it deserves its spot in the top 10. As of right now, strategy remains very similar to what it's always been, using flower selecting and Colress's Experiment to get tons of cards into the Lost Zone to then utilize that Mirage Gate to power up your Goodra VSTAR. Rolling Iron is one of the best attacks currently in the standard format, dealing 200 damage for 3 energy and reducing your opponent's attacks on the next turn by 80. Paired up with that Moisture Star, you arguably are the most tanky deck in the standard format. You have the one of Articuno, which is really good against decks like Lugia VSTAR, as Lugia VSTAR is currently not playing any switch cards, and also Gardevoir EX. You can get those things stuck in the active, which helps you buy time to power up Pokemon like the Hisuian Goodra VSTAR. Rest of the list here, relatively simple, not a whole lot to go over. It's just a strong, simple Lost Zone deck, arguably the easiest Lost Zone deck currently to play in the standard format. So if you're trying to dive into the Lost Zone type decks in general, as there are so many, some of them ranging from very basic and some of them ranging from incredibly difficult to play, then this is the perfect starting point for you, just because there's not necessarily as many hard flower selecting, kind of like decisions and stuff like that this deck has compared to maybe the Turbo Lost Box variants or the Kyogre. So it's a simple Lost Box deck, which is really nice, and on top of it, it actually has pretty good matchups across the board as of right now. It just sometimes struggles a little bit with consistency, and if you don't get that turn 2 Rolling Iron, a lot of your matchups feel relatively mediocre, but if you're able to set up correctly, it definitely is one of the most powerful decks in the standard format. All right, let's hop into number 6. Hopping to number 6 here, we have Fusion Mew. Now, Fusion Mew a couple of weeks ago was not even on this list, but it won the Hartford Regional Championships and the Malamo Regional Championships, and it has asserted itself back into the metagame. This deck has been around for quite some time and has definitely had quite the roller coaster of a ride. This deck was one of the most powerful decks last season in the Arceus and Palkia formats. However, it completely fell out of favor when people started to favor the Judge Path variant of this deck. On top of it, it just was known as a kind of YOLO inconsistent type deck that when it didn't actually get the turn 1 Meloetta, it just felt absolutely terrible. However, players have been able to figure out exactly how to make this deck consistent and work, and it has powered itself back into the standard format, into the top 10. Your goal obviously is to use Cross Fusion Strike to use attacks like Technoblast. However, there's a little bit more depth in this deck compared to the Judge Path variant. You have Meloetta's Melodious Echo paired up with Fusion Strike energy, allowing you to one-shot most of the current standard format, with that Alessa Sparkle allowing you to get those fusion energies onto the field. On top of it, you also have Deoxys. Now, this is a card that a lot of players don't necessarily know exactly what it does, and the main reason why it's in here as opposed to a second Meloetta is because Deoxys has 120 HP, which means against Lost Zone variants, they cannot use a card like Cram-o-matic to be able to spit innocently and take the knockout. So this provides a much more bulky, not necessarily as strong Meloetta in terms of how much damage you can do, but that little bit extra HP is incredibly important. And also, Photon Boost is a relatively respectable attack, especially powered up with things like Power Tablet and Choice Belt. You can get knockout on Pokemon Vs pretty consistently as well. Rest of the list here, pretty interesting. We got the 2 of Alessa Sparkle instead of 3 because we play 3 4 Seal Stone, so you should be able to find that Sparkle when you need it relatively consistently. 2 Boss's Orders, 1 Roxanne. Roxanne still very good for those late games, especially versus Lost Zone variants, trying to make those comebacks to be able to get those victories against those decks that might be known as more difficult matchups. Penny as well, it's great to remove damaged Pokemon off the field. Once again, another tech for the Lost Zone toolbox matchup, which is arguably this deck's hardest matchup. 4 Ultra Ball, 4 Power Tablet, 4 VIP Pass, 4 Cram-o-matic, and 4 Trekking Shoes. That's one of the big things compared to the Turbo Mew variants. This deck plays Trekking Shoes just because it has so many more moving parts as you have Alessa Sparkle, Meloetta, and Deoxys. You need a little bit more consistency as this deck is a little bit more chaotic than normal. 2 Lost Vacuum as well, still want to be able to counter those Path to the Peaks, and the rest of the list here is pretty standard. The one thing I think that's worth noting is Crystal Cave is really good versus those Lost Box variants. Oftentimes what Lost Box wants to do is they want to use that Radiant Greninja's Moonlight Shuriken to be able to damage multiple Genesects or use Sableye over and over again. Putting down that Crystal Cave is going to allow you to heal at least 60 damage off the field, which is really good. I definitely think deserves its spot in this list. But with that being said, Fusion Mew is back, and I'm really happy to see it as it's one of my personal favorite decks, and I think it's going to stay on this list for quite some time and might actually move up over the next couple of weeks. We'll have to see with the upcoming tournaments exactly how it does, but definitely shocked a lot of players at the most recent regional championships. All right, let's hop in number 5. Hopping to number 5 here, we have Lost Box Kyogre. Now, this is not necessarily the Turbo variant with Dragonite and Raikou. This is just more the one prize standard variant. Your goal is to use Comfey's and Colress's Experiment to get lots of cards in the Lost Zone, to then use cards like Sableye, Radiant Greninja, and also Zamazenta. Zamazenta is a really cool Pokemon as of right now with that Retaliate. If your opponent has taken a prize on the last turn, you get to deal 220 damage for 3 energy, which is pretty good. However, your main goal is going to be to use that Kyogre's Aqua Storm at the end of the game to deal 250 to 2 of your opponent's bench Pokemon. Paired up with cards like Sableye's Lost Mine and Radiant Greninja's Moonlight Shuriken, you should be able to take massive 4 or 5 prize card turns to finish the game with the Kyogre. 1 Pokestop, 1 Beach Court are going to be the stadium counts. Pokestop is really good in this deck to be able to mill to the very bottom of your deck. On top of it, we have another interesting card in this deck, Energy Recycler, being a 4 of as opposed to 3. I think 4 is really good because sometimes you get put in those situations with Colress's Experiment or Flower Selecting where you're like, I don't necessarily know what to discard, and oftentimes when you're playing 3 Recycler, discarding them feels significantly worse. So just going up to that 4th one is really nice, just kind of having that little bit extra consistency and kind of allows you to be put in rough situations and get yourself out of them. So as of right now, I think the 4 Recycler is a staple, and I really enjoy it because it just makes it a lot easier on those Flower Selectings or Colress's Experiment on what to Lost Zone. You can feel okay Lost Zoning 1 or 2. That being said, that's Lost Box Kyogre. There is another Lost Box variant on this list that we'll also be going over, but this one is incredibly powerful, and it is my personal favorite out of all the Lost Zone variants. All right, let's hop into number 4. Up at number 4, we have Arcdura Umbreon. Now, this is a deck that Nathan Stratford used to get top 8 at Portland, and it really blew up at Hartford Regionals, seeing tons of success, multiple in top 16 and 32, along with Ryan Harris getting top 8 as well with this deck. Deck is really cool. Your goal is to use that Adventurer's Discovery, which is a card that we haven't necessarily seen in quite some time. We saw it in some Shadow Rider builds a couple of months ago, but it pretty much has been a card that we just haven't seen at all. Adventurer's Discovery is a really cool card which allows you to search for 3 Pokemon V and put them into your hand. Since we play multiple different Pokemon V like Arceus, Umbreon, Duraludon, and Lumineon, we got a lot of things to search for. So our goal is to use that Adventurers to search out things like our Arceus, Umbreon, and Duraludon specifically in in that early, turn 1 or turn 2 to then use Trinity Charge to power up either your Umbreon versus decks like Mew VMAX or Gardevoir, or the Duraludon versus those special energy decks or decks that Umbreon can't actually hit weakness against. This deck is really, really cool and I think deserves its spot on this list, and I'm really, really excited to see how this deck does over the next couple of weeks because it is one of the coolest decks in the standard format. You have tons of plays that you can make and lots of outplay potential with, really cool abilities like that Dark Signal. Effectively being a boss's orders as an ability is just so powerful. On top of it, the reason why you play Hawlucha in Radiant Alakazam is because it allows you to hit those turn 2 Trinity Nova for 220 damage on your opponent's active Pokemon and surprise them. Trinity Nova with a double turbo and a basic energy does 180, plus the Choice Belt deals 210, which unfortunately as of right now is not enough to knock out a lot of Pokemon in the standard format. However, with the Hawlucha, you can damage the bench and then use Radiant Alakazam to move the damage onto the active, which effectively makes Arceus V-Star's Trinity Nova able to take big one-shots on that second turn and pretty much just overwhelm them. Paired up with the Umbreon VMAX's Dark Signal, you can just rush them really, really quickly and wipe out their main attackers on that on that second turn. So yeah, Arctur Umbreon, really, really good, and I definitely have been enjoying playing the deck. And it's, I think, one of the best decks in the standard format, and I think that it is the best way to play Arceus as of right now. That being said, let's hop into number 3. All right, hopping into number 3 here, we have Turbo Mew VMAX. This is going to be the Mew VMAX Double Turbo Energy variant, and this one is a little bit more consistent than the Fusion Mew variant and a little bit more simple when it comes to its lines that it needs to take to win games, which is a big reason as to why I think that this one is slightly better. It's just a more stable Mew variant. Your goal is incredibly simple, just using Cross Fusion Strike to copy attacks like Technoblast, Glistening Droplets, or Psychic Leap. You have arguably, as I said earlier in the video, the best disruption package in the game being Judge Path and also Roxanne Path to be able to brick your opponents in the early game. There's not necessarily a whole lot to say about this deck. It's just incredibly powerful and consistent, and I definitely think it deserves its spot on this list as of right now. You have things like Cleansing Gloves, which is a great tech versus the Gardevoir matchup, on top of also a really, really good tech versus Lost Zone Toolbox. Being able to Psychic Leap time after time, taking KOs without actually having to burn Power Tablets is a really nice luxury that a lot of lists that don't have Cleansing Gloves unfortunately don't have. They sometimes run out of the Power Tablets and they can't actually Psychic Leap for KOs, which becomes really, really difficult when you're not actually able to heal your Mew VMAXs. But yeah, Turbo Mew, incredible. Not a whole lot to say about it. I think it's one of the best decks in the standard format and also really, really consistent and simple to use. So that being said, Mew, I think, deserves its spot. And let's go into number 2. All right, number 2 here, we have none other than Lugia VSTAR. I thought Lugia was kind of falling out a little bit of favor over the past couple weeks, but it surged back this past weekend, performing incredibly well at specifically the Hartford Regional Championships, getting 2nd place and also top for Grant Shen and Reagan Rutzloff were able to do incredibly well with this list. Lugia, really, really simple deck. Your goal is to use the Summoning Star to get Archeops out to use that Primal Turbo to power up Tyranitar, Urshifu, Yveltal, or Lugia. You have the Professor's Burnett, which is used to get Archeopses in the discard pile. As we don't have cards like Quick Ball anymore, it becomes a little bit more difficult to get those Archeopses in the discard pile, which is a reason as to why cards like Professor's Burnett are in the list. On top of also other important one-ofs, we have Penny. Penny is a great counter to Mawile, which is still seen in some decks, as this deck oftentimes needs to bench Pokemon like Lumineon and Radiant Serena, and since you don't actually have any way, since you don't have any other switch cards, something like a Mawile can just instantly lose you the game. So that's a reason as to why Penny is in the deck. But also, I would say arguably the biggest reason is it's incredibly good versus Lost Zone Toolbox. Oftentimes, Lost Zone Toolbox is going to use attackers like Cramorant or Sableye to put damage on one Pokemon, and you can use Penny to completely wipe all that damage off the field. Penny is really, really good, and I think it is slightly better than Thornton just because you have the ability to remove all the damage in the deck. I know some people have been kind of considering playing Thornton instead, but I think Penny is a little bit better as of right now. Mezagoza and Collapse Stadium will be your stadium count. Some people have been going up to 4 stadium. I personally think 4 is actually relatively okay. You could cut a Nest Ball for a 3rd Mezagoza just to really go all in on beating those path decks, but I think that this list is relatively acceptable though, and it definitely is proving itself to be arguably the best way to play Lugia VSTAR. But Lugia still remaining incredibly strong, and I get some new help in the next set Paldea evolved like Jet Energy, so I'm going to be really excited to go over those variants. But Lugia VSTAR, 2nd best deck in the standard format in my opinion, but there's one that is just slightly better than as of right now. Let's hop into it. All right, hopping into it, we have Turbo Kyogre. Now, this is going to be Turbo Lost Box, but with the Kyogre's Aqua Storm. This is going to basically just be aggressive, go as fast as you can Lost Box, which in my opinion is arguably the best way to play the deck as of right now. Now, I think the Zamazenta build is incredibly powerful as well, but I think if you're just looking for a safe deck to take to a tournament that you can do well with, if you know how to play it, then I think this is a fantastic choice. Once again, pretty simple strategy using that flower selecting and Colress's Experiment to get all of those cards into the Lost Zone, along with cards like Lost Vacuum. However, you have Force Seal Stone to go on to Raikou V and Dragonite V, which is really good as you'll be able to maximize that consistency when it comes to either finding Colress's Experiment, getting up to that 10 on turn 2 or turn 3 to Lost Mine, or to be able to set up the Kyogre's Aqua Storm at the very end of the game. You have 2 Pokestop, as well as this deck is going all in on making sure that it can Kyogre at the end of the game as consistently as possible. With so many Judge Path or Roxanne Path decks running around in the current standard format, you really need to be able to focus on burning through your deck as quickly as possible with the Kyogre variant to then be able to use Aqua Storm. Overall, I think this is arguably the best deck in the standard format. The one thing that you could potentially change would be cutting something like a Recycler for a second Cram-o-matic. That is definitely something that you could do. But overall, I think this list is really strong. And this is the deck that players like Azul Garcia Grego and also Danny Attavilla, Grant Manley, and more have been playing to consistent success. But with that being said, Turbo Kyogre, incredibly strong deck, and I think it deserves its spot in that #1 spot. But with that being said, that's going to do it for my top 10 decks currently in the standard format. If you're looking for just the lists, make sure to go check the description. And thanks for all the support as always. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. And with that being said, this is Smart TCG. I'll be back with some more Paldea Evolved content soon, and I'll speak with you again soon. Peace out. If you're looking to improve your game, I do offer coaching on Metafy. I'm currently ranked in the top 10 players in North America, and I know what it takes to reach that level. If you're interested in just finding out exactly what coaching is, I do offer a free consultation here where you can book it and we can kind of go over whether or not coaching is something for you. I do also offer training packages, which are just bundled sessions on top of the individual sessions as well. If you have any questions, feel free to send me a DM on any of my socials or post it in the comments and I'll make sure to get back to you. But with that being said, thank you so much for watching this video and I'll speak with you again soon. Peace out.